Okay, thank you, Cesare, and thank you everybody to be here today. I think we should start, we could start with a short meditation. So I hope you're familiar with meditating. Otherwise, I can just give some very simple instructions. And for those who need, and for those who don't need, you just go on with your habitual practice. So we just try to straighten our back and pull our shoulders back and open the chest so that we can breathe easily. We can keep our eyes open or semi-open or closed, as we prefer. And we try to rest, relax, just being aware. And for that, we can just be aware of our breath as we breathe in and breathe out. Not thinking if we are doing it correctly, for instance, not thinking, just being aware of it. And whenever we find ourselves following a train of thoughts, we just, the moment we realize that we have been following our thoughts, we just let go and bring our awareness back to the breathing, not fighting it, not fighting the thoughts, not following them, but just being aware of the present moment here and now by means of being fully aware of our breathing. So, hello again, everybody, and I'm very happy to see you and enthusiastic about the topic that Cesare chose, like always. And so tonight we're talking about um, Buddhas and beings, to put it shortly, and why or how the fact that we develop devotion towards Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and kindness and compassion and love towards sentient beings can be a support in our practice. And first of all, I would like to say that when we see it in traditional texts, there's always this reference to the fact that the main cause, I mean, the substantial cause, the true cause for attaining enlightenment or awakening is the fact that we have the potential of Buddha nature. Actually, it is the nature of our own mind. So that is the that is the real cause for enlightenment. It's because it's nothing that we really have to acquire. It's nothing we have to even develop in a sense. It's just something that is in ourselves as a potential, is in ourselves already present, but we need to gather the conditions and the circumstances to be able to recognize that, and to recognize it not like in a fraction or in a second or for a brief moment, but to recognize it in a way that it becomes obvious to us, that is enough to dispel all the misunderstandings that we call ignorance in Buddhism. And so that we can start having a completely different experience of the world, which is the awakening, as Buddha himself explained. So this is refers to also to the we could say the theory of the point of view of interdependence and karma. Also, when we understand how interdependence works, we understand that there are the basic causes, for instance, for positive and negative actions, and also that we perform in a moment in our life, either this one or a previous one. So those are the causes, and sometimes they call it substantial causes, but in Tibetan the word that we use is gyu, and gyu means exactly that, the cause in itself. It can sometimes also be compared to a seed, like a wheat seed or a corn seed, that is a substantial cause for the new plant. But then that seed, if it doesn't encounter the proper circumstances, will remain as a potential until it is put in the soil and has moisture, heat, and sun and everything else. It won't grow. It won't bear a plant and fruit and everything else. So there's and those conditions are called the conditions or the circumstances, and the word in Tibetan is kyen. So actually, in order for anything to happen, we need these two sorts of causes. We would say two levels of causes. Two levels of causes. One is the substantial cause. We could say substantial. You understand what I mean? In the case of our mind, is of course not substantial, but it's the real cause, the potential for something, And then the other one is the circumstances. So in the same way, um, our Buddha nature, our nature of mind, is the substantial cause for awakening, is the real cause. It's because we already have it in ourselves. And we don't have a smaller version or a minor version. We have the full potential for awakening. But in order for us to realize that, in order for us to recognize that, we need those circumstances together. We need to gather all that energy, those circumstances that are going to allow us to recognize what we already have. You know, there's this famous quote from the Buddha where he says the difference between Buddhas and ordinary beings is that Buddhas know that they are Buddhas and ordinary beings don't. So that's exactly the thing. We already have this in us. We are already Buddhas, but we don't recognize it. So in order for us to be able to recognize it, we then need to, we would say, accumulate or gather all those conditions that will in the end allow us to know that we are Buddhas. So that's why we need several things, and that's exactly what the Buddha path is about. There are several views also. Not everybody, that's the greatest thing about Buddhism, is even within Buddhism, not everybody agrees on everything. So this is a good exercise for us, because we tend to be very dogmatic in a way, even as Buddhists. So we tend to think, and especially if we don't have much experience or if we don't have much knowledge, we will tend to think that the way we have been taught or the books we have read belonging to a certain tradition are the absolute truth, and that's not necessarily the case. So there are several points of view, but let's stick with this one, that we are already Buddhas. There's nothing that can make our Buddha nature become better, and there is nothing that can kind of harm our Buddha nature, because it can't just grow or decrease. It's just Buddha nature as it is, and it's not something. It's like sometimes it's compared like this, but it's an image, of course. It's not like a gem or anything that we would have inside ourselves. It's our own nature of mind, and then we need certain conditions. We need to gather certain conditions in order to be able to recognize it. And perhaps the first condition, let's say, it's not like a list or something like this, but just for sake of the explanation, we'd say the first condition is what we are here talking today, the devotion towards Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And this for us Westerners presents sometimes a little difficulty. Last year I was in Nepal for almost a month attending some teachings, and 90% of the people who were there, and there were several thousands, were Tibetans. And I was just observing how they relate with all these things. And some of them, well, there were many, many monks, of course, monks, Khenpos, and Rinpoches, and everybody. But there were also many just lay people, ordinary people, perhaps not even people who have always the opportunity of doing a lot of practice, but devoted people. And it was so obvious that they have this intrinsic devotion, so natural. It's a mix of, there is a percentage of it which is really cultural. It's within them, and they manifested it in a very natural way. And I was just looking at that and thinking that for us Westerners, or at least some of us, I can't talk for you, I can't say anything on your behalf, but from what I have observed, even in myself, this kind of devotion is not so, when we talk about devotion for ourselves in the West, it's not as natural, and it's not culturally embedded in us in any way, because it's a completely different culture, and Buddhism only arrived in our lives later on. We weren't brought up in that. So it is not as natural as that. And sometimes I really find that uh, even though in the texts and in the teachings, it is always taught, we always hear about devotion, sometimes it really helps that we try to understand what it is all about. First of all, when we say devotion towards Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, it's a terribly abstract in a way, because Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, okay, how many Buddhas have you met in your life? Maybe we met a lot of them, but we perhaps didn't know that they were Buddhas. And so Buddhas and Bodhisattvas seems like something a little distant. If we're talking about Bodhisattvas, that might be a little easier, because we have all our teachers. Maybe they are Buddhas also among them. We can consider them as Buddhas. So we have to be able to relate this with actual people that we know. And I think our teachers, whether it's Ringo Tuku Rinpoche or other teachers, the Dalai Lama, or anybody that we came across, that we can actually listen, that we can connect with, can also be somebody that we have never met personally, but we have read their teachings or hear their teachings if it's recorded, they're not that, if they're not deceased or passed away so long ago, so we can see them, hear them, and so on and so forth. So those are like the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that we can more easily relate to. But when we say devotion towards them, what do we actually mean by that? And I heard Khandro Rinpoche one day saying something that really made a lot of sense to me, because she said, devotion is gratitude for the wisdom. And I think that really helped me to, it really gave me a very good idea about what devotion is. Because for us Westerners, since, as I said, it's not something so natural, it doesn't come as a cultural thing, we sometimes fall into something much more emotional. Like sometimes see, especially young Rinpoches are followed by a kind of fan club of people who are absolutely thrilled, but in a very, in something that is sometimes not as much a recognition or a gratitude for their wisdom as a sort of excitement, as if they were a rock star or something like that, you know, like people who could become crazy about Elvis Presley or the Beatles, or we're talking about people from my generation and above, but you understand what I mean. So it is very important that we understand that the role of a teacher, the role of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, is to teach us. And that's the kind of relationship we are supposed to have with him or her, is just to recognize their wisdom, recognize their kindness, recognize their spiritual realization, and then feel grateful for it, appreciate it. And that deep appreciation, it can be so, that appreciation brings about a degree of openness. You know, by realizing that they are such a realized being, they have so much wisdom. Wisdom in this sense, it's not an accumulation of knowledge, which they also have, of course, but it's not wisdom in the sense of the accumulation of knowledge, but wisdom in the sense of that we realize, even if we can't exactly put our finger on it because it's an experience that we don't yet have, but we realize that for them to behave, laugh, smile, and just be the way they are, they suddenly have a different view of the world than the one we have. And by view, I'm not only talking about an intellectual or philosophical view, but an experience of the world, an experience that is different from ours. And even though we can't say exactly what it is, because it is still not yet our experience, we can recognize that there is something fundamentally different in the way they see things, in the way they express, in the way they move, they smile, they do everything they do. And because of this recognition of that wisdom, and also the recognition of their kindness, this energy that emanates from them, we feel all this gratitude. And with gratitude, we become open. We know that we have somebody there to whom we can, in front of whom we can open completely. And because we, all of us, have perhaps different experiences in life, and maybe we have come to a point where we closed ourselves, we became a little defensive or a little afraid of being hurt by other people because we had bad experiences, or we have a bad opinion of human beings, and so on and so forth. So we are sometimes very closed in ourselves. We don't open easily. So when we find somebody that we feel, because of his wisdom or hers wisdom, and because of the positive, warm energy that emanates from that person, we feel that it's sometimes it doesn't come as a formulated thought, but there is something in us that realizes that there is somebody I can fully trust. But when we say we can fully trust, it's not trust in the same sense. It's not trust to have an ordinary relationship. It's trust in order to receive from that person all the wisdom, and also to be able to, just by being in his or her presence, be able to have to feel directly the warmth of the pure love and compassion that they emanate. And in a way that not only, it's not the same thing as, for instance, we could say it's like feeling that we are unconditionally loved. It would be something like that, but not as not as something personal. It's not the same thing as being with our grandmother, and who has just and we just made some waffles, and is going to give us with some maple syrup, and we think how great she is because she loves us so much. It's an unconditional love of another kind. It's something that not only we feel showered with that warmth, but not it's not our ego that feels that. Is more like our inner nature that feels showered by this, that at first we sense it or we perceive it as coming from somebody towards us, but then in time, and that's what Guru Yoga is about, is when we start recognizing that actually that love that we are sensing in the beginning as something, some energy or some warmth, like the rays of the sun that are coming and warm us, actually is just the same thing that we already have in ourselves. So having this presence and recognizing the qualities of the enlightened beings and feeling openness towards it, like as in the form of gratitude, of deep opening ourselves and feeling that joy of being able to recognize the qualities of such beings, allows all the same qualities and the same warmth and the same wisdom that is already, that has always been inside ourselves, to manifest. So the reason to have this devotion as recognition, as appreciation, as gratitude for those qualities, and the way this can help us is just by recognizing it outside ourselves, we are actually starting to recognize it, or opening the door or the possibility to be able to recognize it inside ourselves. So that's why the fact that we can recognize those qualities, it's a little bit like even with negative qualities also. When we see the negative things we see in others, quite often are just the projection of our own negative things. So in this reverse sense, when we are able to recognize the qualities of an enlightened being, that means that we are not that far from our own qualities and from the recognition of our own nature and our own inner qualities. So the more we are able to recognize it, the more we generate this sense of gratitude, this sense of openness, this deep joy for what we recognize in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The more we are able to do that, the more our heart opens, and the more these qualities can then emerge naturally. And there is, well, sometimes we talk about cultivating certain feelings and things, but it's not that we need to improve anything within ourselves. We just need to cultivate in the sense, get used to it. Because quite often the feelings that we get more often in our lives are not the feelings of love and compassion and joy and all of that. We are more obscured by the emotions like anger or attachment or jealousy or pride or whatever. And all those emotions are perhaps more often within our mind stream than the love and joy and compassion and all those natural qualities of our mind. But the moment these emotions subside, like for instance, after even a short meditation, we naturally, just by calming a little bit the mind, and even if it's not a long session, and even if we don't feel that we have even been able to remain focused or remain aware in the present moment or whatever, even if we don't consider we had a good meditation, the fact is that just by being a little present, and just by letting the thoughts become a little less, or calming a little bit the mind, immediately we can feel that there is a different feeling when we come out of a meditation, even a short one. We sense that we can feel, if we are aware, if we really pay attention, we can feel that there is something softer, some kind of tenderness that is much more present after the meditation than before. So this is a kind of, for me, it really proves that we actually don't have to do anything to make our mind, our nature of mind better, or to improve something or develop something. We just have to let it shine in a way. But of course, in order to do that, we still, in order for that to happen, we still have to do certain things. But those things are not in order to make our Buddha nature better, because that is not possible. Okay, so developing devotion towards Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, even if that sounds a bit abstract for us, we surely, like Buddhas, when they say the Buddhas of the past and the Buddhas of the future and things like this, may sound a little abstract, something that doesn't connect that much with our own experience of the world or with our reality. So we can connect that with the actual teachers that we have met, to the actual teachers that teach us, those whose books we have read, and develop, kind of cultivate this sense of gratitude for their wisdom, and respect, gratitude, and a deep joy to be able to receive such teachings and witness such wisdom and such compassion. And so, and that becomes a very natural feeling that is very deep and profoundly connected with the path, the spiritual path, and not just an excitement or some kind of fan club or anything like that towards a certain personality. There's also this that is different also. Sometimes some teachers have a very fascinating or charismatic personality, and but some of them don't have that kind of personalities. It doesn't mean that they don't have the wisdom, doesn't mean that they don't have the compassion, but it's just that they don't have this charisma that drags millions of people or hundreds of people. So we can't really also measure the inner qualities of anybody, of course, but not even ourselves quite often, because we don't really know. But we can certainly not measure the qualities of a teacher by the fact that he or she is more or less charismatic. This is a different thing. So devotion towards teachers, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, devotion towards them is this deep appreciation that brings an opening in our hearts, and the recognition that they certainly have a view and an experience of the world that is different from ours, and that's what we also want to achieve. So there's this sense of enthusiasm also. We hear these teachings and we recognize the qualities of the teachers, and we feel also very enthusiastic about putting them into practice, and also we want to become like them. This is also another point, because I have seen this happening in certain sanghas, where the students don't actually want to become like the teacher. They want to be with the teacher. You know what I mean? They want to be close to him, hang with him, have lunch with him, be almost like having private talks or things like that. They want to hang with him. They want to be with him. They don't want to be like him. So that is an important point, because the purpose of a teacher is not to give us the interest to live in the same house as him, or do everything with him or her. The purpose of a teacher is that to give us the desire to become like him or her. So this is an important point, I think, and it makes the whole difference. So when we realize all those qualities and we really have this deep appreciation and this deep gratitude, and this also comes quite often in the prayers, this gratitude gives us the feeling that I have received so much from this teacher. I have received so much teachings. I have received so much, not only formal teachings, but sometimes just by the presence, just by a smile, just a gesture, just by being, I received so much. Then how can I repay? And the only way to repay is to achieve the same level as the teacher. And also the way to repay is then to have kindness and compassion and love for the beings. So the way to repay a teacher is not necessarily by making offerings. That is also a good thing to do, but that's not the main thing. You might not have anything to offer, like materially wise, but the way to repay the kindness of the teacher is by striving to become as compassionate and as wise as he is, so that we can, in our turn, then help other beings. And that's when we come to the second point. And if you've been following maybe the explanations of that Rinpoche has been giving about the several sadhanas or practices, there is always this double thing. If you have a deity, meditation deity, support for meditation, there will be rays of light that grow in every direction and make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then come back with the blessings. And then again, they go. But then the second turn, they go and touch every sentient beings, to purify them from their sufferings and help them achieve purify them from the negative karma or whatever, it depends, but generally in the sense is rays of compassion to all sentient beings so that they can be free of suffering and achieve enlightenment or awakening. So that exactly reproduces the exact meaning of what we are talking about here. So we have this devotion, this deep recognition of the qualities of the enlightened beings, whether they are Buddhas of the past or Bodhisattvas of the present, that we really can touch and hear and see. And from that deep recognition and that deep gratitude, then comes the desire to, okay, I've received so much, how can I repay this? I cannot just keep this for myself. I cannot just rejoice in having received so much and then not do anything with it. So when we get to that point where we find ourselves thinking about what can I now do to repay their kindness, naturally two things come. One of them is that we want to become like the teacher, even if it's not now, not just tomorrow, but we know that it might take some time, but that's what we want to become. Because we can see how useful, how purposeful their life is, how much impact they have on the lives of so many beings, including ourselves. So when we realize all this and we come to this profound, this deep feeling of gratitude, we naturally want to follow the same path. And then, of course, be as useful as they are and be as helpful as they are in order to help sentient beings. And of course, we might think that this is perhaps still not possible for us. We might feel like we are not strong enough or capable enough or have the necessary qualities, but all of that is exactly the obstacles to the recognition of our inner nature. So it's not a problem. We just have to um, keep doing it, and more and more, the more and more we open, the more we connect with these teachers, with the teachings, the more we apply them to our own lives, the more we practice these teachings, not only formally through meditation, but also applying them in our daily life, the more these qualities will become present and the more we will recognize them. So it's more like removing all the veils and removing all the obstacles. And so just in order to let our inner nature shine, it's already shining, but we have surrounded it by lots of layers of different things. So sorry, it's like if there is it's a sunny day outside, but we have closed our windows and our curtains and everything, so it might be very dark in the room, but outside is a lot of sun. So here is the reverse. Inside might be a lot of, the sun is shining, but then it can't come out because we have all these layers. Now, the purpose of the benefit, or how it supports our practice, helping, being kind and gentle, compassionate towards sentient beings, is also because, first of all of them also have the Buddha nature. So in a way, being kind to sentient beings is also the same thing as being devoted to the Buddhas. It's just that because Buddhas know that they're Buddhas and they're not suffering, whereas sentient beings don't know that they are Buddhas, so because of that they are suffering. But in the same way, they also have the same potential as we have. So in ultimate level, they're Buddhas, and in some sadhanas, for instance, at a certain point in the sadhana, you might find sentences like, after we have sent rays of light coming and going and things like this, we recognize that all beings are, in essence, the same deity, the deity of the practice, like all beings are Chenrezig, or all beings are Guru Rinpoche, or whatever the practice is. What that means is that we can see that we can connect from heart to heart, from Buddha nature to Buddha nature, more than anything else. And we can also see that we and the people around us have negative emotions. We are not blind to that. It's not something that we want to avoid looking at or anything like that, but we know it's there. But we know something that most people don't know, or that sometimes we don't realize, or not, maybe we are not completely aware, is that even though those emotions are there, those reactions are there, there's also something else there. And what is there that it's not seen perhaps so easily, because it's not so superficial, is the Buddha nature of all beings. So when we see, or we try to see, or we purify our vision, reminding ourselves that every human being, and even every animal, every sentient being has the potential of Buddhahood, then it brings the aspect of wisdom into the way we relate to other people. And so we can realize that there are emotions, yes, but there is also Buddhahood. So there's two coexist, and they coexist in everybody, in ourselves and in others, and so on and so forth. So by developing or by training in feeling compassion, love, and kindness, and all of these feelings towards others, we are also creating. What we call in Buddhism merit, and here again is a word that translates a Tibetan word called that is sunam, and I don't know exactly what sunam means, but as we translate it as merit, merit is a very tricky word, I find, because it doesn't necessarily convey the meaning of sunam. I think actually merit in the sense or sunam is just positive karma in a sense. So when we talk about karma, we tend to even always see it as with a negative connotation. Like when somebody says this is my karma, is not generally talking about something positive. It's generally talking about something negative. But karma is just karma. Karma is not positive or negative. It's just the consequences of our actions. And if our actions are positive, then it's positive karma. And if our actions are negative, then it's negative karma. But then there is another level to that. It's any action that we are creating, whether positive or negative, is always comes always from this sense of identity. It's me. I am doing good, or I am doing bad. I am reacting with anger to something, or I am reacting with compassion to something else. But so there is positive karma that is just positive actions that will create positive results, but within the frame mind of my ego or my identity. So they will bring about results, but these results are not necessarily oriented for a spiritual practice. What I mean to say is, when we do positive actions with a positive intention or with the aspiration of bodhicitta, for instance, even if those actions are very small in appearance, and even if it's just a very small act of kindness or generosity or something like that, the moment we have this, we set this intention, perhaps before doing whatever we are going to do, or even just in the beginning of the day, just by setting our intention and saying that we wish, like we said in the beginning of this session, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. The moment we say and the causes of happiness, we are actually giving a different depth, adding something. You know, one thing is wishing that beings might be happy. Another thing is that wishing that they might be happy, but also have the causes of happiness, develop the causes of happiness, of deep, ultimate happiness. So when we add this, then we create a different kind of positive karma. It's not just because, you know, you very well know, I think we all have had the experience of in ourselves, or maybe sometimes watching people around us, positive, when something positive happens in the life of somebody, it's not always positive. Sometimes something very positive can create a lot of obstacles, for instance, in the spiritual practice. You become suddenly very rich, for instance, and you might not be able to use that resource in the proper way, and it might become an obstacle. So positive is not necessarily positive for a practitioner or somebody who is involved in the spiritual practice. That is why merit, or this the aspiration prayers we do in the beginning of the day, or in the beginning of a session, or in the beginning of a meditation practice, are said in a way that we develop this intention. May this help me and all beings. There's different ways we can say it, but may this be directed, or maybe this be infused with the wish of attaining enlightenment. May this energy, this positive action, not just be a positive action that will bear a positive result, but a positive result that is conducive to a spiritual practice, to a spiritual enlightenment of myself and others. That's also why we do the dedication prayers in the end, to be really sure that it's not just a positive action, period. It's a positive action that has a spiritual intention, that is devoted, that is aimed at a spiritual development. And so when we create all of these positive actions in regard to the beings, we are actually creating connections. It's a very interesting thing. In the text, they say that actually the accumulation of wisdom is what helps, it's what brings about enlightenment, but the accumulation of merit is what allows us then, once we have realized, once we have become awakened, the accumulation of merit is what then allows us to share that with others. So that's a very interesting point, because when we say that the Buddha, for instance, he practiced as a bodhisattva for an extraordinarily long time, he was actually not accumulating wisdom for his own enlightenment, because probably he was already enlightened, but he was creating these merits so that his teaching could be, to create these connections with beings, so that his teaching could touch and transform so many beings. And the fact that 2,500 years later we're still talking about this is the proof that he really took time to make sure that he has created enough connections so that his teaching can reach far in time and in space. Because it is possible, and it certainly happens, we don't know probably because for obvious reasons, but it's possible that somebody might attain enlightenment and then not have enough merit to be able to share his or her realization with that many beings, because he has not taken time to accumulate the merit and the connections with enough beings so that it might spread and remain also. I'm sure there have been many spiritual teachers, many spiritual teachers who have attained a certain degree of realization, but whose teaching just lasted for one, maybe two generations, and then just disappeared because there was not enough merit. And I remember Rinpoche telling a very funny story also. I can't put the names, but it was like, it was something with Gampopa, and he had 3 students, and he asked them to, he said, I am going to give a certain initiation in 1 month. And so you all have to make a special hat for that initiation. And so you have 1 month, so go ahead, and then in 1 month we meet again, and I will give you that teaching. So the 3 of them went, and then a month later, the 3 came back, and I think it was Gampopa, but I can't swear. So anyway, and the teacher gave them the teaching. And then he did a little comment, because one of them had just made, he had just shown something that had more or less the shape of a hat. and thinking, well, this will do, you know. The second one had made a little bit more effort and had put something a little bit nicer and had a little more effort into it. And the third one, oh my God, it had made a beautiful hat with brocade and pearls and, you know, and special stones and everything. It was so beautiful. And then the teacher said, you know, to the first one, yeah, because you just made something very simple, you will achieve the realization of this practice, but you won't be able to share it with anybody. Then the second one was a little bit better, but then the third one, he said, no, because you put so much effort, so much. Um, you gave so much of yourself into what you just did. Your hat is so beautiful, so well done, so perfect, so proportionate, so that you will have a lot of disciples and your lineage will go far and for centuries and for generations. So it's something like that. It might sound a little strange or maybe silly, but that's it. It's the amount of merit, the amount of energy that you put into things. And especially when we're talking about this connection with beings, it's very important because these connections that we create in a lifetime, because of our intention as bodhisattvas, you know, and there are prayers for that also, like prayers where you say, may all the connections that I have created in this life, whether they're positive or negative, doesn't matter. When I become a Buddha, may all of these connections become opportunities for those beings to connect with me and to be able to attain Buddhahood through that connection. So if you can imagine, if you spend lives and lives and lives and lives cultivating this attitude and creating these connections, then we have like a web of connections with so many people that then we are able to share and have authority recognized by others, not for our own benefit, of course, but by the fact that others recognize our authority and recognize our wisdom, then they can be open to receive much more. So creating merit and accumulating merit is mainly for others. Accumulating wisdom is for ourselves, and accumulating merit is for others, for us to be able to share, to share our realization, to share our experience, to share what we have achieved. And of course, that doesn't mean that we are going to be able to miraculously save anybody, because that's not the way it works. Everybody has to walk his own journey, but we can then become a Buddha or a Bodhisattva in the same way as we started our explanation today, and manifesting all these qualities that other beings can recognize. And the beings that will be able to recognize those qualities are those with whom we may have created connections in previous lives. So that is why it is so important. And that is why also the Buddha's teaching has been around for 2,500 years and has touched so many beings during all these 25 centuries and counting, because it's not disappearing yet. So that's the idea. So the reason why we do that, we cultivate kindness and love and compassion towards others, helps us, of course, in the immediate moment, helps us getting rid of our self-centeredness, getting rid of our selfishness, of all the negative things that cloud our Buddha nature. And in the long run, all those positive actions that are really done with the motivation of achieving enlightenment for the sake of all beings, that all beings may achieve that liberation from suffering. All the actions that are done with such motivation and dedicated to the enlightenment of all beings are then creating the causes, the seeds for all these connections to blossom in future times when we will be really able to inspire all those beings to also attain Buddhahood and also get free of all the suffering.